Hey there, it's Michelle Caruana from Play Cafe Academy and Profitable Play. And I have another recorded coaching call for you today on this channel. I know these are kind of fan favorites. I've been getting a lot of great feedback on them, and they seem to have a lot of views and a lot of downloads on my podcast. So if you prefer to listen instead of watch these kinds of calls, if you just want to put in your earbuds and go grocery shopping or whatever the case may be, all of these are also available on my podcast. It's just the Profitable Play podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's also linked in the video description. But again, by the looks of things, you guys are really liking these recorded coaching calls. So please always feel free to let me know if you like them in the comments or make any topic or video suggestions. I love hearing from you there. But today we are speaking to Ashima, who is from the Boston area and who recently signed her lease to open her business called STEM Spot. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about her business in her own words in just a minute. But Ashima is really ironing out all of those pre-opening details. So things like pricing, packages, we're currently working on her website. So that is what we focused on most in this call. So we're going to talk about ways to generate revenue pre-opening because unfortunately her build out has been delayed a little bit, and her area already has a lot of soft play rentals and things like that. So she was looking for some different ideas. So we talk about ways to generate revenue, ways to generate leads and create more social engagement, even pre-opening, things like that. We also talk about becoming the face and voice of your business as opposed to a more professional company feel. So kind of first person versus third person on social media and on websites. And we kind of go through the pros and cons of both scenarios. And then finally, we talk all things birthday parties. So pricing, types of packages, private versus semi-private, time slots, staffing, logistics, and a lot more. So this is a really great call. Again, if you are in the planning phase or in the pre-opening phase, or if you're just looking to refine an existing business or maybe launch a second location, these are the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about. So again, very practical call. And I just want to thank Ashima for all of her time and energy in asking these questions. I've linked all of Ashima's information, her social media channels, and her website in the video description if you want to check those out. But without further ado, let's talk to Ashima from STEM Spot. Hi there. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get started into the coaching call portion, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and let everybody know where you're located, what your business is called, and where you are in the process of opening?
Sure. My name is Ashima, and we're located in the northern suburbs of Boston, about 30 minutes from the city. I got to my space, which is called STEM Spot, basically from my journey as a researcher in STEM education. So I used to tell after school programs and museums kind of how they could improve their programming or how they could evaluate their programming to see if kids are actually learning, since we can't use tests and that kind of thing in informal environments. And I did that for 14 years and said, you know what, I feel like this is great, but I want to make my own space that can really be a good fit for helping kids learn STEM and get excited about STEM. But also, I was a parent at that point, so also would be a great place for parents to be able to hang out and relax and kind of get what they need out of a kid space that a lot of the kid spaces I went to didn't really have, all the things that I hoped they would have. So that's the story. And in terms of where we are in the process, signed a lease in May. I hoped to have signed the lease earlier, so that got a little delay. We're a little behind. And so now the kind of architect design piece is finished, and we are getting ready to have the contractors start to do the build out, but we're kind of finalizing who's going to do that and what the timeline is. So a little bit of a nervous phase because I don't know the exact timeline, but hoping as fast as possible at this point.
Awesome. And I think that kind of guides us perfectly into our conversation. So do you want to just get right into it and
Sure.
talk about what questions you have on your mind?
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. So about the timing thing, that's kind of where my major concern is right now. Obviously, I've not done this before, so in my head, I didn't really understand how long contracting and all that would take, or construction would take. So now we're in summer. I was told when we were supposed to sign the lease in the winter that, oh, it'll be like 2-3 months, like people aren't as busy, it's fine. Now we're in the summer, which was not my plan. And so now it's like everyone's busy doing renovations or whatever they're doing. So I can't get contractors to go fast. So I'm now looking at, I don't have to pay rent until October, um, which I thought was plenty of time, but now it's not looking like plenty of time at all since we haven't even started build out. So I'm wondering what I can do in the meantime. And I have a couple ideas. And my two concerns are, one, is it worth it? And two, will it in any way hurt my like the branding and the image of what I've created? So what I'm hoping to do, I don't want to do like soft play rentals. There's tons of that in my area. Kind of all the classic things that you could do already exist. So what doesn't exist is kind of these things that focus on adults. So I was thinking of some sort of like, because that is my thing. I want my space to be really great for adults too. So I was wondering if it'd be worth pairing up with like beer gardens, restaurants, places like that that have these kind of like dead times in the middle of the day, like I don't know, 1 to 4 or even like 3 to 5:30 before it gets very busy in our area. Most of the parents in our area like to take their kids to the big beer gardens because there's room for you to sit. The kids can run around. It's like kind of easy. You can bring food for your kids. So let the venue, if I can find the right venues in our community, kind of provide the food and the drinks or whatever people want to do that has nothing to do with me. Like they would just pay for that separately, but they allow me to use this space to do kind of like a pop-up hands-on STEM. I don't know yet, like a mini museum. I don't want to call it a class, but like or just like a open play or whatever it could be called, a science time or something. And we would have, I have a few, and this is where I'm a little worried, like a few signature items that are kind of different than other areas, like these giant blocks you can build with and things that are usually found in museums. I have those, and I was thinking maybe do those because it's kind of a wow factor. They'll also be in my space. And then some things that everyone does, like sensory bins. And then like one maybe hands-on craft with like our staff. So some sort of, and by staff, I mean at this point, probably like my family helping me because we wouldn't have the staff yet. But I don't know. I obviously like baseline when I ask people, they're like, oh, that'd be so cool because then we'd like have a snack and like hang out, meet our friends, and then our kids could do these science things. And of course, we'd love to do that for, an outing or whatever. Like they have different festivals and things going on in the summer. But I guess I'm wondering, like, should I say STEM Spot presents this pop-up and then have people maybe associate us with maybe a watered down version of what we are? Or is it a good thing because it gets people thinking, oh, there's this place coming, we're so excited about it, and then use that to maybe put pictures or even our architect, like our plans and designs, to be like, guys, this really cool thing is coming, but until then, like, we just want to introduce ourselves in the community. So I can't tell if this is like a good idea or a bad idea because the money I don't think is going to be that significant. Like I'm not making the sales on the food or anything, and I have to still pay for all the like the stuff for the sensory bins. So I was like, maybe we charge like $15 or something. Our open play will be well over 20 because we're in the Boston area, but like let's do a little lower price point because it's not the full experience, but it is kind of like a special add-on experience. And people are paying for all sorts of other things right now for the summer that you have to pay for to, you know, go experience at like the farmer's market or whatever. So anyway, that's like, I'm playing around with this idea. I casually made some brochures and then I stopped because I was like, I don't know if this is even a good idea. Like for watering down the brand. I saw in the group, some people said like when they did things before opening, they use a different LLC. And I was like, oh, I don't want to like do all that. So anyway, was just wondering if you had thoughts on what I could do to maybe build hype, but also not hurt future image of what I want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to get the logistics out of the way first, I don't think you would need to open a new LLC or anything like that. I think that's more for the people who operate for years, operating a completely different business model. So those people who do only mobile play for, 3 years, a lot of people do that. And the reason they have a separate LLC is because that business becomes so established that they want to keep them completely separate and it kind of takes off on its own. So, because you are doing this with the 100% intention to gain awareness and potentially a little revenue for your new space, I think operating under the same LLC is perfectly fine. Especially because, if for whatever happens, worst case scenario, your space ends up closing, you probably won't continue operating
Right.
that initial revenue stream, which again is a big concern for people who have a established mobile rental business. They don't want the two aligned. They don't want the debt that's assumed by the brick and mortar to be, intertwined with the mobile division. So that's, I think, why a lot of people will separate them. They also might get separate insurance for those reasons. But again, I don't think that you need to worry about that. And I also don't think you need to worry about it watering down your brand. And I think you are in a really perfect scenario to do this because a lot of indoor playgrounds, they don't have a niche focus like STEM activities, right? It's just indoor play. So it's really hard to come up with event ideas or things like that that stimulate what they're going to be offering because all they're going to be offering is indoor play. So it's really hard to replicate that in other venues, especially outdoors. So I think for you specifically, you are in a really unique position in that you can give people a similar, at least a taste of the experience that they're going to get in your space because you have this niche focus. And a couple ideas that I wrote down because I was going through your questions before we hopped on is Katie from Adventure Brews is actually doing exactly this. So she does a lot of pop-ups at both parks, community centers, restaurants, things like that. And she will do very similar activities, crafts, events to what she's planning to do in her space. And she's been doing this for months. She is in an area that has very low rental inventory. So she actually hasn't even signed her lease yet she has been in the community, like boots on the ground for months and months and doing these events. She's been growing her social media channels. She's been learning what works and what doesn't work. She's been making really valuable connections in her area. And that kind of brings me to my next suggestion is I wouldn't focus so much necessarily just on the revenue. I would really come up with a set of specific goals that you would like to come from this endeavor. And I would try to keep your focus on that. So what I mean by that is growing your email list and growing your social media channels, because we've seen, time and time again in the group, people who take the effort and the initiative to grow their email list and social media channels prior to their launch, they just inevitably have a more successful launch, right? I think the phrase I like to use is, the longer the runway, the more powerful the launch. So people who start earlier and start promoting and start, making those community connections, getting out there in the community, whatever that looks like, they inevitably have those business assets built up. And that can absolutely never hurt. And it can really only ever help. So when you are, putting together these events, make sure you're having people sign, even if it's not like a full waiver because you're not having people enter your own physical space, have a sign up form, have a registration form, and make sure you're collecting email addresses with permission to be able to market to them in the future, because that will almost be more valuable to you than just that short-term revenue boost.
Right.
And while you're there, ask them to, follow you on social media, or you can say, in order to incentivize this a little bit, you can say, hey, we're going to take some pictures and, follow our Instagram if you'd like to be tagged or if you want to see the photos from this event or whatever the case may be, because a lot of people will just want to see what pictures you ended up taking. They'll want to share them and things like that. So again, making sure you understand what the actual goal is for these events is going to be really important because like you said, I don't think it's going to be groundbreaking in terms of revenue, but
Right.
you can make some really significant progress building up those channels and those business assets. And something to consider as well, especially if you find the right business to work with, like let's go to your brewery example. If you can find the right one that's maybe new or maybe is looking to break into a new customer base, so maybe they don't have a lot of parents coming to them yet, or like you said, they have a really dead time. A lot of times they will kind of do a hybrid partnership where they will almost fund some of the activities just in order to get people in. Because you have to remember that this isn't just benefiting you, it's also providing a significant benefit to them because they're getting new people in the door. They're, like I said, potentially reaching a brand new customer base. If they haven't marketed themselves as family friendly before, this is a great way to all of a sudden get a great new influx of customers, and they're going to be making food and beverage sales. So you might be able to approach some of them. And I wouldn't say, I wouldn't have everything 100% ironed out when you go to them. And I would make it more of a conversation. And I would try to position it as helpful to them as possible. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you approach, let's say, the GM of a brewery, say, hey, I'm creating this new, family-friendly business. I've already started growing my social media channels, even if that's, not true yet, because there's going to be time between now and then.
Right.
You could absolutely start doing that now. You can say, hey, we're going to be opening a business that does X, Y, and Z. You know, it looks like your space is great for families, but I've been there a couple of times and I haven't seen a lot of families or something like that, right? And
Yeah.
say, I would love to bring, more Boston area families into your space. Here's my idea. And kind of, give the high level bullet points and say, I would love to work together on this. If you would like to talk and flesh out some of the details, let me know, and try to make it a conversation, because like I said, they might be willing to either subsidize some of your costs, so they might actually be willing to give you some money for supplies because they're getting a lot of the benefit here, because they are going to make a significant amount of money during a normally dead time in those food and beverage sales. And of course, they can mitigate their risk a little bit by saying, oh, you have to make, in order to attend, like maybe they'll make it free. So maybe they'll pay you for your costs in exchange for making the event free to get as many people in as possible. But to mitigate their risk, they can say it must include a minimum $15 food and beverage purchase or something like that, right? These are the kind of things that you can talk about. And because you are only probably going to be doing this with a handful of businesses, you have the power to customize every single agreement, um, every single partnership. And if you can find the right one and maybe do it like every Wednesday or every Sunday afternoon or something like that, it can be really easy to replicate. And I think about it almost like the Home Depot workshops, right? They're free. They get people in the door. That's the main driver, is they just want to get people in the door. And I
Yeah.
love those activities specifically because yes, they're making a craft, they're getting something to take home, but they're also involving Home Depot's mission, right? They're building something. They're learning some engineering principles, they're learning some building principles, even if it's a very approachable way to do that for kids. So I think if you can come up with activities that, again, give them a final product to take home, because everybody always loves that, but also involve the mission of your space in some way, again, a STEM activity, I think that's going to be really attractive to people. And even if it's not, necessarily a craft project or a workshop or something like that, one of my kids' favorite channels to watch, it was on Netflix. Now I think she's moving to YouTube, is the Space Gal, and she does really cool STEM and science experiments on YouTube and things like that. And what I love about them is a lot of them are very affordable. So they're using household ingredients, but they have a big wow factor, right? So like a perfect example is, the big bins with baking soda and vinegar and color, that's like one of the
Right.
most basic ones. But
Yeah.
what I love about her, a lot of her experiments is that, it's not only a workshop for kids, because of course kids are always going to have fun with science
Right.
experiments, but it's
Mhm.
also kind of for the parents,
Yeah.
because you can give them a supply list. You can say, hey, this can actually be replicated at home if you guys are ever bored on a rainy day,
Mhm.
and kind of teach them how to have fun with their kids. Because, I know for me, I went to school for economics and finance. I'm very much not, a science person. I never could think of really cool experiments to do with my kids. I would love to get some ideas that, I could put in my back pocket and just some inspiration. I would love to be able to do stuff like that with my kids. I just don't know how or what to do, or even like how to explain it to them. So if I can
Right.
have somebody explain the underlying concepts and principles, and then we could just replicate it at home a bunch of times, I would absolutely do that. And like you said, it gets people out, it gets people to a location that they maybe haven't tried before. And for me, I love bringing my kids places like that, but they definitely need something to do,
Yeah.
right? My kids won't, they'll get kind of bored if they're just sitting at a beer garden. And again, depending on the ages.
Right.
So I love the idea of doing something that's a little bit engaging for them. And I also love the idea of still bringing some of the blocks, because something that you're going to run into a lot is families like mine that have, an older child that is going to be really engaged and really interested in the science experiment, with a younger sibling who maybe is tagging along and they need to be engaged, but they're maybe not old enough, or maybe they're not, developed enough to participate in the more the more intricate activity. So I love the idea of having both a, imaginative, more like engineering type toy like the blocks that's very approachable for any age, and the other activity, because this opens it up to, again, parents of kids with age gaps, or like my son has autism, he just wouldn't sit and do an experiment.
Yeah.
And so if I saw that they were going to be doing an experiment plus just have this really cool physical element, I would be like, oh my gosh, this is perfect for us. Silas can just go play with the blocks and
Yeah.
he can be extremely happy and engaged. And that allows my older child to focus on the science experiment. So I think doing a combination is absolutely
Yeah,
great.
so it's not that structured. I don't want to make it too structured. Exactly. So you can come and go when you need to.
Exactly.
And then if the kid is playing with blocks and is like, oh, I hear everybody oohing and eyeing over there. Let me go see what that, whatever bubbling thing is, the experiment is, then they can walk over there too. So when you were saying that, so I agree that the revenue, I guess in my head, I was like, oh, if they give me the space to use for free, like that's nice. But I guess you're right. They're making a lot more because they're going to have the food and beverage sale. Should I not like, so do you think I should charge, or it should be more like the goal of spreading excitement? Because if I charge, I would probably feel odd since they don't know me yet to charge full price of what open play would be, obviously. So then it'd be lower, but then you always talk about like you don't want them to think something is lower price. So I imagine that people will forget and or realize that going to the space is different than a pop-up. So if I charge like 10, $15, that's okay, right? If I'm going to still have a higher price point when you actually come to the facility, do you think that people will be like, oh,
Yeah,
I
I think it's completely
okay,
apples to oranges. I don't think that people are going to equate what you offer in a completely different space is going to, they're not going to say, wait, it's not free when I actually go in person, right? I think people
okay,
are
yeah,
generally smart enough to know that, but I really think it depends on the expectations that you set. Like you said a couple times, people can just come and go. It's very casual. I think that is more of a free offer.
okay,
So again, if you do something that's very low cost, very approachable, just something that people can like come, do really quick, get some oohs and ahs, and then go back to their dinner, I think that's a free offer. However, if you're doing like a 1 hour workshop that has structure, that everybody sits down at the same time, that, is more of a group activity, I think that provides just a different value. It's not just the experiment, it's also teaching the kids to do something as a group, listening to instructions. To me, that is a separate experience. So I think it depends on the agreement that you're able to come up with. Again, going back to the brewery example, if they just give you a table to set up, kind of like a booth, and they're like,
yeah,
oh, this is what we can offer you, I think that's a free service every time. Again, and just try to collect as many email addresses as possible. Something that I like to do if you're not having people sign a waiver is do like some sort of contest or something like that. So for this example, something that might work is, let's say you're doing a science experiment. I would bring a second set of materials and make it like a basket and maybe put in some beers or something from the facility that you're at, put together a gift basket and say, hey, if you participate and sign up for this raffle, we're going to give away at the end of the night or at the end of the weekend this basket so you can take home all this cool stuff and replicate this experiment at home. Again, as a way to make sure that you're not just, because you're not going to be able to get revenue from it, at least you're building your channels, you're building your email list. So do some sort of attractive but low price raffle, because you're going to be buying the materials anyways. You might as well just buy a little bit more to be able to put together a basket to get some leads. But if they say, yes, we have a private room, we'll give it to you from 2 to 4, we'll advertise it on our channels. It's going to be, a sit down workshop. Like, for example, I know Michael's used to do this. I don't know if you, or like our Tops used to do this, which is a regional grocery store. They used to have like a cooking class. And you would go, they would provide all the materials, and you would just make a dish with your toddler. That was always a cost
okay,
associated with that. And again, because it's a whole experience, right? You come at a scheduled time, you sit down, you follow the steps from start to finish. It's a whole thing. So I think if that's what agreement you're able to come to, that I think you should absolutely charge for, just because it's going to give everybody a better experience, I think. Because again, if you're doing something for free, people might see it on social media and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to that. And then they might forget, or they're
right.
going to come late, they're going to be less committed, they're going to bring other activities for their kids to do, they're not going to stick around. But if they have to pay a price for something, especially if they're doing it in advance, they're going to show up, they're going to be more engaged, they're going to have a better experience, they're going to take more pictures, they're going to be more likely to share it. And I think that would lead to a higher likelihood that they would be, again, more likely to engage with your business in the future if you give them like a higher level sit down experience. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I think they're just different. And I think you can do both. I think some breweries, let's say that, again, I keep coming back to the brewery example,
Yeah.
but
Popular around here. Everyone goes to the breweries here. It's
I know,
like,
and it's
yeah,
top of mind because
yeah,
it's been a while since I've been
yeah.
able to go to one. But I think, some breweries are going to say, oh, we really can't offer you a private room, but we can do this. I think you take that opportunity and again, cater it to that business. But some that are maybe a little bit newer or have more space, they'll be able to come up with a different agreement. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. They have each pros and cons. But I think, again, just making sure you are aligning people's expectations with the price, I think that's going to be your best bet.
So you did I don't know what it was now, if it was a podcast or a lesson, but something on the whole when you were trying to increase revenue once you did the pay what because you were trying to buy the Caterpillar, I don't know what it was, but the pay as you pay what
Do
you
what you
like,
want.
right? Is, is there a slant where it could be like we're this new small business coming in, we're really excited, we just want to show you what we're offering, and then there's just like a thing that says pay what you want, like to help us get started? Would that be look weird, or do you think
You could
that
absolutely do that. However, I think one of the reasons that it was most effective for us, and again, in that it is a podcast episode, by the way, I can link it.
yeah, yeah,
But there was pros and cons, right? So it wasn't, that was not, to be clear, that was not an episode saying everybody should do
right,
that. It was
right,
kind of an episode saying, here's what worked and here's what didn't. But
yeah,
in summary, I think the reason that we were able to reach our fundraising effort is because we had already been open for 2 years. And so people were already very invested in our space. They knew us. They felt comfortable, giving us their money because we were already established. We had a great relationship with them. And the people who gave the most were our, ride or dies, our day one supporters, our super
oh, okay,
fans. So
yeah,
that would be my only concern
I'd
is
have to
that.
like make them trust us in like 5 minutes and
Right,
yeah, right,
exactly. So my
right,
only concern would be most people paying the minimum because they don't
yeah,
know you. And
right,
also when somebody, even if you've signed your lease, I know for me, I've been burned, not necessarily, I don't want to say burned, that's dramatic, but I've donated to plenty of GoFundMe's that never ended up launching. Or, I ended up just randomly getting my money back one day because they didn't reach their goal,
right,
right? So a lot of people see these, oh, this is coming soon, and they see it
right,
as a little bit riskier, as, not as tangible. So that would be my only concern is either most people paying the minimum because they're not as invested in your space, they don't have a relationship with you yet,
right,
or people not being willing to invest as much because they can't see, touch, and feel the
right,
space yet. So in their minds, it's not necessarily real.
got it,
So that
okay,
would be my only concern. I think that's more of a tactic to use once you've already been established. Like, for example, one of my favorite ways to use it is for like donation-based play. So if we were going to be giving back to an organization or something like that, that's when it felt really good. That's when we had a lot of success. Or again, if we were going to be purchasing something specific that people could use almost right away, like as soon as we hosted that event, it was in our space within a week. So again, it was a very quick turnaround. They got that instant gratification. So I think that's a better time to use
yeah, they're
that.
not gonna get instant gratification with this plan.
Yeah, so that's my only
Okay.
concern.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I think, right, I'm just worried about turning people off either way, right? So like free, I don't want it to be just a booth. Like I do want to provide some sort of experience, like added experience, which will cost me something. But I don't know, people do pay for a lot of like less exciting things in our area. So I just feel like I think in my head that it would still be really nice. Like I'd want my kids to go to this. It's like an opportunity to have like a mini museum experience for the day without having to drive all the way to the city and park and do the whole thing. But you can do it just for like an hour and have a beer and like hang out. Like I just think I would pay for that. So maybe it's where we can just try it. And then if I have very low sign up, then make it free the next time or something. But yeah, I think figuring out the right price point and all that will
Yeah,
probably be
I would just focus on covering your costs and just
yeah,
go into it knowing it's not going to like be a
right,
windfall or anything like that.
yeah,
And really just more so focus on getting people to follow you on subscribe to your email list. Because if you don't do that, you're going to end up paying for ads, or you're going to end up boosting posts, or whatever the case may be. So you're going to end up paying for leads and for followers at some point if you want to grow faster, right? So I think this is a great way to attract people to your list and your channels. It's just one more way, I guess, of paying for leads. It's just a more creative way than doing like
Yeah.
Facebook or Instagram ads. So I think if you can just cover your costs
Yeah.
with whatever price point you charge, that's going to be good. And then don't forget, you can charge a different price for each event. So
Yeah.
it's not something that you have to put a stake in the ground and say, this is going to be the price for all my workshops. You can do one-offs. So
Right.
we're going to be this place at this time doing this experiment. It's going to be $10. You can see how that works. And then the next time, people aren't going to, like, I wouldn't expect people to have like great expectations that everything's going to be consistent. So choose a different location, a different experiment, therefore a different price based on what you learned the first time. Um,
Okay.
so
And I have,
don't worry about putting too much, don't worry
yeah.
about too much deciding too much ahead of time. I know that's been a consistent worry of yours.
I love to do things ahead of time. Okay, but now it's forcing me to kind of do this, I don't know, not in the most organized way, a little faster than I wanted, but we'll figure it out. And then I have wellness, sorry, yeah, wellness living, like we're ready to go, but I have them on pause because we're obviously not going to launch until I have to collect money. So do you think it's okay to just do this like with a Google sheet, like you just sign up and then you just collect on Venmo or something? I don't need to do like a formal have them registered that like the way they would when we're open yet, right? Because that's like a whole, they'd have to make profiles and all that. Yeah.
Right. No, I think it's fine. Or you could just set up, Square is something that's very inexpensive. I think it's like, I think there's a free version, but I know people at like craft shows and things like that will even use Square,
Okay.
and just do like scan to pay or something like that. Or you can use Venmo for business. As
Okay.
long as it's, going into the correct account and things like that, I think it's absolutely fine. And you do not need all the bells and whistles from like a CRM. But
Right.
again, just make sure that you do have your email service provider set up. That is one thing that I would do. You don't necessarily have to have, you can be on a free version. So I
Yeah,
think I talked
I'm
about,
on MailChimp and it's
okay,
linked to the website. So yeah, we're good
perfect.
with
Yeah, as long as you have that and any way to pay. I know Square integrates with MailChimp a little bit. So you should be able to make those two talk to each other without having to involve your whole CRM.
okay, perfect. All right. And you said the name of the person was Adventure Brews, like
Mhm.
BREWS. Yeah.
Yes. But it's in reference to coffee, not beer. It was just a coincidence that we were
Yeah, I
talking
know.
about
Now it's on
beer.
my mind. I was like, oh, interesting. Gotcha.
No, but she's been doing great community events. And like I said, she hasn't even signed a space yet. And she's not doing anything that you were concerned about. So she's not doing rentals. She's not doing anything like that. It's just community engagement events.
Okay, cool.
All right, do you want to change topics?
Sure. So this was kind of prompted by the live event and when we were kind of talking about social media and TikTok and all these sort of things. And I was looking, I feel like businesses, sort of small businesses, fall in two camps. Some people, it's all kind of centered around the actual owner. And I don't know. I guess maybe I feel like 20 years ago I might have done that, but like now I have like my husband and my kids and everybody that would also get roped into kind of that storyline. So I wrote my about like concrete examples. I wrote my about me page like on my website. And it was first written in like the I format, like I did this and we were in the military and we moved around and this is why I'm making this. And then I was like, oh, now do I have to keep telling the story, kind of this narrative in that way with all my posts? And do I have to be kind of the I don't know, the face, or even if I'm not always on social media, but like, is it all about how I'm projecting this, which a lot of people I see do that? Or should I switch since I haven't launched the website? I'm about to, but I'm like nervous to start it. Should I launch it as like the owner used to travel around and wish for a place? And here's what the owner wanted to do, like third person. And just if like in your experience, because I know both exist, especially in the group, even within the group, both exist. Do people that do it the more personal way, does that is that better because then people feel more connected to them, or am I missing out by being a little more protective and not making it all like first person? So that's not I think it starts with the website, like with the about me, because I know some people in my area write the owner and talk about the owner versus saying I made this because, and then of course social media and posts and how I share things. So I guess I didn't give it that much thought. I just always assumed it would be first person because that's what most people I look at do. But then now that I'm about to do it, I'm getting a little hesitant if that's really what I want to do. So just wondering if you've seen issues either way in any of like the coaching calls you've done, or if you just have advice, or maybe it doesn't matter. Should I even be worrying about this?
No, it's a very valid concern, and it's a lot easier to shift once you're already launched. But again, it's kind of a subtle shift. So I don't think you need to be, again, overly concerned. Whatever you decide, you can absolutely change. It's not going to be like jarring for your customers. And to be honest, my answer for this has changed over the years as I've gotten, a little bit more mature as a business owner, as I have just grown. I used to be definitely more in favor of being more of a first person advocate just because it was, I thought a great way to connect with people, like you said, to form personal connections. However, now I am much more hesitant to do that. And, especially like we were talking about this weekend at our live event, I think having a business that is solely focused on you is creating a more people dependent business. And we talked all weekend about how not creating a people dependent business, even if that person is you, is so crucially important because, it's not just about selling potentially someday or something like that. It's also in your day to day. Because if you operate your business as this is me, this is the owner, if you are always yourself, if you're always first person on social media, or if you're always, first person on your website, that kind of lets people know that, you're doing everything. You're the person to go to. And that can make it really hard to set healthy boundaries with your business. If people send you a message, they're automatically going to think it's Ashima they're talking to. If people send an email, they're going to title it, Hey Ashima, and that is great when you're a very, very small business. But once you start to get busier, once you start to grow or expand, people might get confused if they send you a message and a staff member responds, or they might, feel disappointed if they send you an email and it's a support person or something like that. So as I get older and again, just more mature as a business owner, and as I've seen some stuff, and, I had very unhealthy boundaries with my business when I first got started. So having gone through that, I am much more in favor of a more company focused business. But having said that, that doesn't mean that, like you said, you can't have your brand story on the website. I think, I've visited tons of indoor playground websites that don't even have, the owner's story or pictures or anything like that. And it is very kind of, I don't want to say like cold, but it seems very corporate, right? It seems like it's a
Right.
chain, or it seems like it's, run by some big, scary men in suits in some boardroom or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that you can absolutely still form meaningful connections with people, even speaking as more of a company brand in the third person, specifically on your about page, specifically on social media. And a lot of times, because I transitioned once I decided, about 2 years before we sold our business, I decided I was going to sell our business. And I started making that slow transition away from I'm Michelle, I'm this owner, it's always going to be me, it's me you're going to see behind the counter, all that. I made the transition, and I still absolutely talked in first person at times on social media. But for those posts, I would say, like, I would sign it Michelle, or I would put like quotes, or I would just make a distinction. But 90% of our posts were still, hey, we launched this new offer. Like, it was always we as a company, because it also validated how important my team was to the business. Because I noticed that once I had a manager, once I had somebody doing our events, I noticed that by only speaking in first person and making the business all about me, it was almost invalidating their work and invalidating their importance in the business. And by allowing them to post on social media as themselves. So it wasn't just me posting on social media and then signing Michelle. Sometimes our manager, Sarah, would post and then she would just say Sarah. So people knew if they saw I, or if they saw, oh, this really cool thing happened today, and then they signed their name, they would know exactly who was speaking so that it wasn't inconsistent, so that they understood, okay, wait, who's talking? Is it Michelle? Is it the manager? So I thought that it really helped, again, create a business that wasn't dependent on just one particular person, but it also gave them more of a voice, which helped them feel more empowered, more important, like I said. And it just, again, helped me create those healthy boundaries, which can be so, so difficult. So again, I think you can absolutely still make meaningful connections with people being more of a formal company and speaking a little bit more in the third person. Now, I don't think you necessarily need to scrap everything you've done so far. I
Right.
just think that putting some distance between your identity and the business is not going to be a bad thing. Because you can still speak in first person on social media. You can still post from your point of view. But again, if you are going to be always the first person, people are going to expect it to always be you. And that extends not just into, answering emails and answering messages. Back when I was, the face of everything, if somebody walked into a birthday party and it wasn't me hosting, they were like, "Oh, where's Michelle?" Or like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this feels weird." Or like, "Oh, I thought Michelle would be here." And that surprised me. I didn't realize that people would draw that conclusion, but they expected me to be at every single thing. And that's when I was like, "Oh no, this is not what I envisioned. I have to take a step back." So I wrote down a podcast episode that I recently did with Mariana from a company called Brand Magnetic. But she actually talked, it's episode 275. She talked about actually creating a very powerful and engaging brand story. And we talked about this specifically about doing it in first person versus doing it more as like a company vision. So I think this could be a great hybrid for you. It's not something you have to do right away. It's not something you need to hire a professional for. In that episode, she kind of talks about how to create a really powerful DIY brand video. So I think having, an about page that's a little bit more buttoned up, that protects your privacy a little bit more, that gives your story without being in the first person. I think accompanying that with a really cool video in the first person saying like, "Hey, I'm Ashima, this is my family, this is, some stuff that," and you can even include clips of what you're doing, in the near future with events and things like that. You can kind of share your business's origin story, how you got started. You can share some clips from the build out process. So I think combining more of a personalized video in your social media, on your website at some point, again, it doesn't have to be before you open, but having something that kind of shows you speaking and shows a little bit more into your, personality and things like that without, making everything in the first person. I think that could be a nice middle ground. And again, she
Okay.
has some really specific, great examples of how to create something like that that still creates that distance between your business's identity and your identity. So to summarize again, I think I'm pretty sure my opinion has changed on this. Like if you go back to my early YouTube videos, I'm sure my opinion's been different. But now, and actually even as we speak, I'm transitioning to more of profitable play as opposed to Michelle Caruana for the same reasons, because I'm now looking to hire, playroom designers and more consultants and things like that. I don't want everything to always revolve around me. And
Right.
unfortunately, that's the environment, that's the expectation you get when you
Your
create
name tag.
an
Yeah.
I business.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And so I think right now, since I don't have like staff yet, I was going to do some of the initial social media posts that I have like planned out. We're just going to be like, hey, like here's the space. I'm so excited. Here's my background. But then I was going to do some when we dove into like the kind of activities we're going to do. I might switch the wording to be like, we really believe in STEM because blah blah blah. And so there's a mix. Like they'll get to see why I started in my story, but then also like then slowly transition because I don't know, it just feels like a lot of pressure to have it be about me. And I don't, it's not, it is a bigger space and the style of what we're doing isn't going to be one where I'm going to be there every day. At least I hope not. I mean, it will be in the first year, but not like I do plan to have a staff. So it is going to be a team. And I plan to have like instructors and teachers who are really talented STEM educators also. So they won't, I want their voice to be heard as well, like you're saying. So, yeah, okay, that's helpful. I almost kind of just needed to like hear someone else say, yeah, it's totally fine to not make it all first person. So that's good.
Yes.
That's kind of where I was leaning. So that's good. All right. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about was birthday parties, which I've brought up a couple times, and I've changed my packages several times, but I guess I'm just trying to make the final call now. And I know it's not actually final because we can still keep changing it, but I want to feel like I've landed somewhere since I have to put the text on the website at some point. So my space is 3,300 square feet and it has really big windows and is really like beautiful when you walk in. And so to me, that is the sell. So when you get the space for a birthday, I would think you'd want your photos in that main beautiful area with the big windows. You'd want that whole space to yourself. We're going to have like the cafe sort of winding to the right, but with like this kind of curved wall. So you have like this big play space and then this nice, like, bar seating wall that's kind of dividing it with the cafe area, but everything, you can see everything from everywhere. And these windows are there. I do have a separate, where you go through a door, a separate classroom, you could call it, area. And now that we're looking at the architecture plans, it turns out to be smaller than we expected. It's totally fine for classes. You can fit like 20 kids in there for a class. But for a birthday party, if you actually want to put proper seating, and if I want to make sure, which is, I advertise that adults don't have to stand like they have to do in other places. If I actually wanted to put seating for adults also, you can only probably fit like 10 to 12 comfortably. So now I'm kind of, so I had wanted to do semi-private birthday parties also, just because I feel like a lot of people do it. But I guess now I'm just wondering if it's worth it in numbers, or is it okay to just say, you know what, I'm going to be just a private party place, because my my semi-private parties were like $450, let's say. And then my actual, the whole space ones were 650. And yes, that's some difference in price, but I don't think it's so significant that I don't know. I just feel like I don't want people to come and say, oh, there's this beautiful space, and then because the next party came in, we got squished into this tiny little room. I'd rather just use it for like the classes and the sensory days and everything else we wanted to use it for the kids, and maybe just keep the birthday parties private. So what I'm wondering is, will I be losing revenue, and or maybe that's not the right question. Maybe it's like, can I just advertise this to the type of people that would want private, so that I don't have to worry about the semi-private situation? But just because I have this space, I actually don't think it's the right space for the type of birthday party I want. So I guess I want to take away the semi-private option and only have private parties. And yes, you're gonna have, okay, so I do have daytime parties, like a play date party, where if you only have 10 or less kids, you can use that room. So like you could be an open play, and then you could just go have that room for 30 minutes to like cut cake or whatever, because you can't do it in the play area. So that's an option if you have less than 10. But basically anybody that has more than that would have to have a private party. So if I have like 12 people, if I have like 14 people, will I say, oh, that's very annoying that I have to rent this whole space? Or will I be like, isn't that nice that I get this whole space? Whereas you can go up to like 75 people in my space. So obviously people with lots of guests will like that, but I'm wondering if I'm losing the middle group of people, and if that's even that bad, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that, it's not always just about capacity. It's not always about number of people. Like we will always just pay more to rent out the facility because it just works better for our family with my son's special needs and with all that stuff. Even if he only has a couple kids coming, we budget ahead of time to rent out the whole space, and we won't run out of space if it's way too expensive to rent it out privately. We only look for places with private rentals. So I wouldn't necessarily make the only distinction number of kids. I
Okay.
like that you have the cap at, 10 kids for the small room, so that somebody doesn't try to just save money and have a giant party in there, because then they would have a bad experience. But I would kind of, not just think about it as a capacity issue, because people have all sorts of reasons for wanting a private rental. And in knowing your area, first of all, I think your prices are very reasonable. I've seen places want to do private parties for like thousands and thousands of dollars. So I do think your prices are, well within reason. One question I had, and I'm so sorry if you mentioned this in the beginning because I think it's changed a couple times, but what is going to be your oldest age that you cater to?
So during the week, it's just going to be 0 to 8, but really it's better for 0 to 6. And then on the weekend, we will, in that smaller room, have things that are smaller that little kids probably shouldn't get into, so that we can accommodate up to 10. But it's really for 0 to
Okay.
6.
Will you be planning on doing any parties for kids where parents don't have to stay, or are you drawing that line?
No. Yeah, you have
Okay,
to.
because I was going to say, for my older son, we drop him off at parties now.
Right.
So I think that would be a really interesting semi-private option if that's something that you were thinking about doing. But since it's not, we can kind of just cross that off the list
I
because
think
they
not
don't need a
yet.
lot of
Maybe
space
later. Yeah,
because
maybe later.
adults don't stay.
Right. Right.
So, having all of this information, I think it's totally fine and totally viable for you to roll out as just a private party space and prioritize that. see how it goes, and you can always add semi-private in the future. I think your playdate option is a really great middle ground for people who love your space but maybe can't afford, or maybe, doesn't just have just they don't have the budget for the party, or they just don't want to have a big party, whatever the case may be.
And weeknight parties are an option too, and those are cheaper too. So like there are options if
Right.
you don't want to
So
pay.
take this as your permission to not do semi-private parties at the beginning, but also, like we were talking about before, you don't have to put a stake in the ground and say you'll never do them. It's
Yeah.
always something that you can keep in your back pocket. And what's great about that is, like, let's say you book out, enough private parties, but, at some point you just want to reach a new level, right? And the way that you can maybe fill in some of those gaps is semi-private parties. You can position it and say, hey, we've heard your feedback, we've listened to you. We're going to be offering this, new package based on, certain availability or something like that. Like you can only do them at certain times or something like that. And you can position it as, hey, we're listening. Like this is feedback that we got from you. You can almost give your customers credit for it to make it look like you are, listening to their constructive criticism, and you're, launching something new just for them, something like that. And, hopefully they won't listen to this this
Yeah.
coaching call because you had the idea
Right.
forever.
Right.
But I think it's really smart for you to prioritize private parties, especially because you feel that that's what your space is going to
Yeah.
best do.
Right.
See how it goes. you know, you can even say like, hey, we're rolling out, our party packages. We're going to, we might add more packages as it comes. You don't have to say that, but
Get
it's
like
something you
feedback.
can do as
Yeah.
an option.
Right. Right.
But I love the idea of just rolling out the private parties first, along with that, kind of mini playdate option, seeing how it goes, making any adjustments, improving that package until it's perfect. And then, maybe during your slow season, that's something that you could start offering as, maybe a summer party special or something like that. And what I love about that is by doing like a summer party special or something like that, there's an end date, right? You don't necessarily have to do it forever. It kind of gives you an out,
Right.
and you only have to book those parties in your slow season, because semi-private parties can get very complicated, very
Yeah.
messy, very chaotic in busy season. So you can try
Exactly.
it for a season, see how it goes, and then maybe you can surprise people and say, hey, you know what? This worked really well. We made a lot of money. Nobody complained. So we are going to do this year round. Or you can say, we'll be back next summer or something like
Right.
that.
I mean,
So
like
you
the
have a lot of
level of
options.
experience, I'm just so sick of going to the ones where this exists. Every kid in our area goes to the ones where it's like a machine, where it's like in next one, like you're leaving and the next group's coming in, they barely clean the tables, and it's like just well, it's just a machine and everyone's paying for it. And that's fine because that's the only option. So I'm trying to offer something different. Now, if we read the market wrong and they say, actually, we don't mind being funneled in and out of a room quickly, and then fine, I can go to that, right? But I think there's enough people saying this is annoying and it'd be nice if there was a better option. And like when you were talking about pricing, I am scared though. It's like what it should be priced is like $1,200, but the reason I'm pricing it lower and closer to what everybody else is doing is because we're new, so I'm just trying to get people to come in. But like I'm offering in my head way more. Like if mine's 650, but you get the whole this nice, beautiful, clean space to yourself, versus they're paying 650 plus for these like rooms where you're squished and the parents are standing on the like side of the wall and there's not even food for the parent. So I don't know, like should I start off with the higher pricing to be like I actually think my product is more higher quality, or like you say just start where I want to start so that I get people in the door and then raise prices to show like hey, we're actually doing really well and this is worth more. Like could I hurt myself by pricing? I'm pricing similarly, let's say, to what's out there, but I do think my what I'm offering is better. I just think
It's
it is.
always easier and better to raise your prices
Yeah.
than to lower them. So I like where you're starting. I wouldn't go any higher, because not only, as you were just kind of alluding to, not only does it signal to people when you raise your prices that demand is high, people are loving the parties, you're doing really well, right? So it
Mhm.
it immediately just, subconsciously triggers this like urgency, like, oh, I better book this because people are really loving it. Prices are going up. I better get the price while I can. It signals this, positive connotation with your parties, right? That you have to raise prices. That's
Mhm.
number one, because the opposite is true if you lower
Yeah,
prices, right?
there's
It
something wrong.
signals that
Yeah,
something is wrong.
yeah,
So you never want to do that unless it's absolutely necessary. But what I love about raising party prices as well, we raise party prices every single year because it was like a built-in boost. because every single year we would say, hey, we're about to release our, 2019 pricing or whatever the case may be. This is your last chance. You have 2 weeks. Make any booking. It can be a year in advance. Make
Mhm.
any booking you want at the current price before we release our new pricing. And it was perfect because we did it like right towards the end of the year. It gave us a huge surge in deposits and bookings for the remainder of the year. It gave us that boost before holidays so we could make some investments. That was our busy season. So if we needed to replace any toys, if we needed to purchase stuff for events, it gave us that really nice big surge. And it also allowed us to save some money. And
Gotcha.
it gave us a lot of bookings months and months in advance for our slower season because, a lot of people aren't likely to book more than a couple months in advance unless you give them a really good reason to, like you're going to raise the package
Right.
price by $100. So
Okay.
again, not only does it signal all good things when you raise prices, it's also a built-in marketing campaign.
Huh.
And, I'm not a big fan of using like false urgency or false scarcity. But in
Right.
this situation, the
You're really
scarcity
doing
is
it.
very
Yeah.
real because
Yeah.
you can't double book a party.
Yeah.
There's only one private party spot available on each day. It's very real. And there is real urgency because you are going to be true to your word and you're going to raise prices. So it's
Okay.
kind of, again, that built in marketing campaign. So honestly, even if you just have to bump up like $50 a year, even if you don't necessarily have to,
Right.
I think it's a really great way to get that big surge in bookings.
Oh, that's really smart. Yeah, I didn't even think of it from the marketing perspective. So yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. Yeah, I think that that's good. So I just need to get people like
Start
enjoying it. Word of
simple.
mouth. Yeah.
Start
Yeah.
simple, roll out your highest priority packages first, the ones you are most concerned about, and then you can always add in the others. And because what I love about that is you're going to allow your, quote unquote best customers, the ones booking your priority packages, to choose the best dates and times to their liking. Then I don't want to call them your secondary customers, but kind of like the people that are booking your lower tiered offers, they're kind of filling in those gaps,
Right.
which can be really nice.
Okay. Perfect. So one last speedy question
Sure.
was, I'm noticing when I'm doing my scheduling, which is also a problem, like when open play is, when different activities that we have are classes, etc. Um, Sometimes if I want to have the best birthday party time slots, especially on the weekends. But I know in our area, people are like, because we're in a place where it's very cold, people want to come to some place like an open play type place during the weekends. I'm not ready to fully commit to not having open play on the weekends. I know that birthday parties make more money, but I still want to offer it just because I know that's what people want for now. So what I'm finding is to squeeze in open play sometimes at like these odd times. Sometimes it shortens it. Like it might, instead of, so I usually have like 8:30 to 11:30 and then 12 to 3, 3 hour blocks. So then it might become like a 2.5 hour block or just 2 hour block. Have you ever done that or seen that? And does that lack of consistency bother people? Because they're like, because I don't think I want to keep changing the ticket prices. So it's kind of like open play, whatever length of time the open play is. Because I'm assuming if it's a 3 hour block, no one's going to stay, or most people are not going to stay the full 3 hours. It's more like to give you a block of time to come as you need. Um, should I try to force 3 hour blocks so that there's consistency, or is it okay that like the weekend open play is only 2 hours or something like that?
I think that the times, so open and close, that being consistent is more important than the length of time being consistent. If
Okay.
people really care about that half hour, they'll just plan ahead and come during the 3 hour block if it's, again, really that important for them.
Okay.
What I will say is that I'm looking at your proposed schedules. It looks like you have the open play blocked from like 12:30 to 3-ish. I will say that was our most popular party slot. So that
Uh,
might be something that you want to think about. Can I ask you one more question? I can't remember this, so I apologize. But did you plan on having a cafe?
yeah.
Okay. So I would really encourage you to consider doing instead maybe an early morning open play. We had a ton of people coming in at like 8 a.m. Saturday morning for open play. We didn't do open play on Sundays. We only did open play on Saturdays from 8:30 to 12 and then immediately went into birthday parties. So we did Sunday. The only time you could book a morning party was Sunday morning. Saturday, it was open play from 8 to 12 or 8:30 to 12, depending on, we changed it a couple times. But we had a very consistent, very loyal crowd at that time because I'm sure parents have lived basically a full life by 12:30 p.m.
Yeah.
But it's easy to get individual families in there at 8:30. It's very hard to have like a super early morning birthday
Right.
party. So our number one party slot was Sunday morning, so 10 to 12. However, our second biggest party slot was 1:30 to 3:30 on Saturday. So my only concern with your schedule would be, it's harder to get people in on a Saturday morning, I think, than Sunday. I think more activities like sports, things like that, they take place more often on Saturday mornings than Sunday mornings.
Right.
I think Sunday mornings were easier for us to book party because it's a low commitment time. So I would consider or I would encourage you to consider doing like an early morning Saturday open play because like we're an early bird family. We would be there at 7 if they opened. And
Yeah.
sometimes we do go to coffee shops early, but I'm not going
Right.
to plan my son's party at that time. I'm going to plan it at 12:30 or 1 o'clock. So because I wouldn't say that for every business, but because you're planning on having a cafe, I would consider Saturday morning open play instead of right in the middle of the day.
Okay. I'll
Because
play around with that. I think what some people were saying and want to come for open play in the afternoon. Um, but you're right. I mean, you can't have a birthday party
not
and
for the 0 to 6 age group
yeah,
though.
yeah.
We're looking for stuff to do now with our 7 and 9 year olds in like the afternoon. But
Mhm.
back then it was morning or nothing, pretty
Okay.
much. Like if we were invited to a birthday party, sure, we would plan naps and we would, one parent would take the older child while the younger child napped. But for that
Okay.
0 to 6 group, we're not doing like random activities generally from 12:30 to 3 unless we paid for a ticket or unless we got invited to a party. We were much
Okay.
more likely to just get whatever activity out of the way early in the morning because it allowed us to have some coffee. It allowed us to have some
Right.
peace in the morning. It started off the day in a structured way. And kids are just better in the mornings. Like
Yeah.
at that age, they're just more, they're just in a better headspace, as is everybody.
Right. Yeah.
And like I
Especially
said,
after coffee. But
yeah,
yeah, you're
Saturday
right. I
morning.
didn't think of that like you're right. Like it's good you pointed out to me again that I have a cafe because that's true. Like no one's gonna really buy. I mean, they will, but not as much in the afternoon. So I'll have more coffee sales if
And
people are
it's a
coming.
bigger draw. Like I would not expect people like you can't get me somewhere at 7 in the morning if there's no coffee or like
Right.
even basic pastries or anything like that. But if there's coffee and if I can sit while my kids play and I can start my day off, in that nice way, I will be there.
Okay.
But again,
Cool.
you're not going to be able to have a party at that time. So I think missing that 8:30 to 10 a.m. time slot, I think that's a mistake.
Mhm.
So I would consider instead doing open play in the morning and then shifting to private
Your
parties. Again,
party started at what time on Saturdays? At 1?
1:30 for us. So we
Oh,
closed at 12, then we did a shift change, we gave people breaks, and then we completely transformed our space. And I'm not sure if this is going to be true for your space, but for ours, we had to completely, it probably will change for yours because we had to completely like we pushed all of our tables together. We took down and again, these are like nuanced logistics that you're not going to think
okay.
about until you're open. But like for example, during open play, we had like baskets of snacks out. We had brochures that we had all this stuff out for a party. We had to clear all of that off.
Right.
And that was, a significant work effort because
Mhm.
we didn't want people to just think it was included with their party and start grabbing toys in the retail section. So we pretty much cleared off our entire counter. We pushed our tables together, which you'll know if you move a table, you gotta sweep
Yeah.
under it. It's like a whole thing. You have to now do a whole mop because you're moving the tables. I think it's just going to be a little bit more difficult to do open play sandwich between parties because of those smaller logistic items. And is it doable? Sure, but is your staff probably also going to hate you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just something to consider, especially if you're doing private parties, because again, your space is probably going to have to completely change and reconfigure. So that's just something to think about.
Yeah, and if it's long enough, like if it's till 12 or 12:30, then so there's like a field nearby. So even if people had games at like 9 or 10 and they had a younger sibling, they could stop by after and get like a snack or have their
Right.
lunch. So yeah, okay, cool.
And then if you do, I know you put in your plan like some occasional events on Sundays. You can put those in the afternoons when you don't have party slots to get people that are not early birds. They can still have a way to use your space on the weekend without having to get there at, 10 a.m. or 9 a.m.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that sounds good. I've reworked this a couple times, so that's good. It's helping me get closer to some answers.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's all I had that's urgent at this point.
Well, I really appreciate your time and thank you so much. And I'm so excited. Your space is one of the ones I'm most excited to visit. So
Well, I
thank you
can't wait to have you
for,
over here. I hope it's open and ready for you guys to come over soon.
yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to share and ask questions. It was so helpful.
Thanks for all your help. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, that wraps up my coaching call with Ashima. I hope these questions and answers were helpful to you. All of Ashima's information and social media handles website are linked in the video description, as are mine. And as I mentioned in the beginning, if you have any topic suggestions or video suggestions, let me know in the comments because I love creating content that you actually want to watch. All right, I will see you soon. Bye for now.